So it's out there. I think it's one that has been grabbing people's eye because, people just looking at it wouldn't know what it is, but then you look and you see the names of the Human League and Gang of Four. And
you guys are wasting all our good talk. Come on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pull it together.
I thought this was the podcast.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, we should, we'll save it all for there.
Pull it together, boys.
Right. Let's take it back to one.
Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your host, Sean Hartman, originator of the legendary Minnesota Mutant polka sound.
Oh, that sounds sick. Do you have an album coming out?
Album forthcoming.
Okay.
The originator, but the album's still coming.
Yeah.
Patent pending. I'm co-host Jeremy. And I'm shocked and excited that we found a guest host that agreed to do a 25-hour podcast episode with us.
We found the right person for that, for sure. I am co-host Peter Cook, and I'm excited to announce that I've started a new company.
Oh?
Yeah, Peter Cook's Toy Division.
What's the ticker? I want to buy in on this.
Well, we got a little bit to work out with the business yet. In the initial stages, we've been known to ship the products so fast that the recipients end up with damaged goods.
Oh.
So there's some things to work out before I say too much more about that.
Yeah.
And we, as Jeremy alluded to, we do have a special guest in the house who is prepared for 25 hours of podcasting with us. Who is here?
I'm going to have to talk very, very slowly. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on, fellas. It's me, Jon Solomon. Hi.
Hi, John.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing just fine here. Jeremy and I in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Sean over there in Philly, which is not too far from where you are.
No, I'm here in central New Jersey, the capital county of Mercer.
And tell our listeners a little bit about what you do, John.
Sure thing. I'm a DJ at WPRB in Princeton, New Jersey. I've been doing a show there since Reagan was president. And I also run an independent record label called Comedy Minus One. And I like talking about music a great deal, both on the radio and off, so I'm delighted to be your guest on this episode.
Yeah, and you will, in about 1 month's time, be doing the annual tradition on the radio that you've been doing for quite a long time.
Since Reagan was president.
For sure. So in addition to the weekly program that I do on Wednesday evenings, I also do a 25-hour show every year starting on Christmas Eve and running through the end of Christmas Day. And this December 24th is going to be the 34th year for the marathon.
Wow.
Which, yeah, you're telling me.
I tuned into that for the first time somewhere around 7 years ago because former guest of the show, Ike Turner, had suggested that I contact you about playing a Christmas song by my former band Boring People, and you were kind enough to do just that. You played Boring People on that 25-hour marathon. So thank you for doing that 7 years ago.
My pleasure.
Well, John, what did you bring to put on the turntable today?
Today on the turntable, we are putting on a compilation called Mutant Pop, which is often occasionally known as Fast Product or Fast Product, the First Year Plan. It's a collection that came out in 1980. The copy I own is on New Jersey's own PVC Records.
Yep.
And it's a look at music from 6 singles by 6 British bands, released in 1978 and 1979 on a label called Fast Product.
Yes. So this is a little different from what we usually do here. We haven't featured a comp before, but this one sounded like it's very interesting and a very influential label that not a lot of people know about. So happy to have you suggest this one and happy to feature this Fast Product, Mutant Pop 7879. Where do we want to start?
Yeah, well, since the first band on my copy of this record is the Mekons, why don't we start with a song by the Mekons?
Heck yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we were talking about the song Where Were You, which was their second single. And we'll talk more about that, but let's go ahead and play that song.
Mekons was a band I never thought we would be talking about on this podcast, but I love the Mekons.
Oh, were you familiar with them before?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Them and Human League and Gang of Four were the 3 bands on this I actually knew of, and the other ones, I didn't know nothing.
Those are the 3 biggest names on the comp that, really definitely had some, I would say, exposure in the States.
Yeah. That song in particular was featured in a documentary by my favorite documentarian, Adam Curtis, and his Can't Get You Out of My Head, An Emotional History of the Modern World.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
At some point, you've talked about Adam Curtis often. I need to check out these documentaries.
I've sent you 27 links since I've known you probably. And
and I still haven't.
Yeah.
You're going to have to sit me down after one of these sessions sometime.
Yeah, I'm going to Clockwork Orange you here.
Yeah, the Mekons were the first band signed to Fast Product when the label formed in 77, and this release came out in January of 78. Or, well, I should say that song was not, it was a different song. The first single that they put out was Never Been in a Riot, and this was their second single, Where Were You?
And that first Mekon single, apparently Fast Product sent it to Rough Trade for distribution, and they said it was the worst thing they had ever heard.
Oh.
Wow. It's too rough for Rough Trade, apparently.
Yeah, I realized maybe I should have done this when I came on initially, but I should list all. You touched on a couple of them, but I just wanted to run down the bands that are on this compilation.
Yeah.
For specificity and make sure that everyone knows. So you got music by the Mekons, 2.3, the Human League, Gang of Four, Scars, and Flowers. Those are the 6 bands on Mutant Pop. And that Mekons song, like you said, it's their second single. It's since, unlike a lot of this music, which hasn't been properly reissued, that single has since been re-upped by Superior Viaduct. And it just soars in my headphones. And I like the Mekons. I like select Mekons songs a great deal. I've never worshipped at the foot of the Mekons like some of my peers that I know think they're the greatest band in the world. I've never had that moment with them as a band on a whole, but for those 2 minutes and 47 seconds, they might be.
Yeah, they're not the most consistent, but they have some really high points, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely remember sort of in there are songs of theirs in their more, I don't know, honky tonk sounds kind of pejorative, but there are definitely like songs like sometimes I feel like Fletcher Christian and other songs of theirs from the late 80s and early 90s that I always enjoyed playing on the radio. But they are one of those bands that the people who like the Mekons really, really like the Mekons. And I don't know, I feel like I'm slagging on them a little bit unintentionally, and that's not my point. It's just I wish that I could have the same experience with the entirety of their catalog that some of my friends do. That's better said.
Yeah, well, and they've been consistently releasing stuff since they formed they were University of Leeds art students, and they formed in 1976, and they were putting their first stuff out by 78, and they've consistently been releasing material. They have over 20 albums to their name now, and they've put out stuff as recently as 2020.
Yeah, they did a record with Janet Bean and Catherine Irwin from Freakwater called Freakons that I think might be their most recent record. And if not, there's probably another one that's come out since this sentence started.
Wow, I didn't know. That's a brilliant collaboration name, Freakwater. I haven't thought about that band in a while. Great band.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's turn towards this label, though, Fast Product. The label Fast Product was founded in Edinburgh, Scotland, by a man named Bob Last and his partner, Hilary Morrison. I guess Hilary, gave Bob a copy of the Buzzcocks Spiral Scratch EP, which was the first independently released British punk record. It was on a Manchester-based label called New Hormones, and this inspired Bob and Hilary to form their own label. I really couldn't find a whole lot of information about what else Bob had done prior to this. I think there was one thing that said he had been a roadie for the band The Rosillos, but he's kind of a little shrouded in mystery, as much of Fast Product is in general.
No, from what I was able to piece together, he has had kind of a fascinating series of careers, both in music and otherwise. He's been a music supervisor for a number of films. An animated short that he was a part of was nominated for an Academy Award.
Yeah, The Illusionist.
Yeah, exactly. Even in this one article that I read in The Guardian, it mentioned that he was considering reviving Fast Product, not as a record label, but as a company that would sell bicycle parts.
I found that too. I thought that
mountain bike components, to be specific. But for a label that put out this compilation that has meant so much to me for so many years and collects music from these 6 different releases, the Fast Product discography is actually quite small. It's just 12 records in total, and the hit to miss ratio is pretty ridiculous.
As far as what
just looking at the catalog and for only putting out 12 records, I think they're all winners.
Yeah, and to have had released the first official stuff from the Human League and Gang of Four and the Mekons. That's just incredible. It's 3 towering post-punk bands.
And then putting out a trio of 12-inch and double 7-inch collections called Earcom, and then they wrap it up with what I believe was the first British release for Dead Kennedys, the California Uber Alles single.
Yep.
So that's wild. I mean, they this all happens between basically 1978 and 1980. So they burned fast, but at the very least, the legacy of the Fast Product Mutant Pop compilation in my life and in my world is long lasting, because I remember probably first discovering this record in the WPRB music library when I was a kid. There's a well-loved copy there that's been in the collection for eons, and I was trying to remember how many times I've purchased this record, because there are a handful of records that anytime I see them for $5 or less, I will just buy it and know that I'll be able to give it to a like-minded person who will also appreciate it. So the copy that I have here with me tonight, I know that I got at Reckless Records in Chicago, or more likely my roommate Dan, who worked there at the time, saved it for me. I know I bought a copy at a random record store the only time I went to Los Angeles, and that was back in 1995 or 1996. And I've picked it up at least twice at the Princeton Record Exchange. So it looks like this copy was first on the shelves at Reckless in August of 1994.
Wow.
So that tracks. Yeah. It's been a while since I've come across one of these, but yeah, I think I said in the email when we were trying to pick a record to talk about, I think about this compilation the same way that I think about the Bright Orange Years by Volcano Suns or Shatter Your Day by Flag of Democracy. Just records that are always cheaper than the value that I hold for them in my head. And I know that I'm always going to be able to gift a record like that to someone who will really appreciate it, because they're each wonderful in their own ways.
Yeah. It's great when you can find something, that you can relatively affordable, that you can just be like, I want to get this in more people's lives. So I'm going to grab this up, and you probably have someone in mind each time you pick one up too.
100%. And it's a terrific primer. For me, it's a great transition from, being in grade school or high school and being really into punk rock to learning about something more compelling and jagged and bouncy. And I think another thing that's important about Fast Product is it's a true entry point. Like, you could pick up this record and listen to it and say, hey, I want to learn more about these bands. And next thing you know, you're listening to Entertainment by Gang of Four, or you're discovering how different the Human League sound became from what it was on this record. Or like you said before, you're learning that there are more Mekons records than there are stars in the sky to choose from. Like, there are all these different directions. If you have the seeker gene, there are all these different directions you can go off in from this single starting point.
Yeah, the only artist that we've featured on the podcast that's on this comp previously was the Human League. Our third episode, we covered the Dare album, which obviously by that point, that was a very different band than the material found on this compilation. One of the lesser known artists on this compilation is 2.3, which we wanted to feature Where To Now by that group, correct?
Absolutely.
So how about we listen to that song and come back and talk more about it?
I would like nothing more.
gone home. No magazines or trendy scenes hanging on the telephone. She knew 19 to get home. A camera click, a leather shake. Now you're on your own. Had a good time. Now we've reached the end. Had a good time. Now we've reached the end. Where to now? Where to now? Where to now? Where to now? Won't you tell me? When you get depressed, open your scrapbook. Remember all the really famous people that you followed. Took your brother place and laid his way. Can't seem to get in. You'd like to go back and start again, but you don't know where to begin. Had a good time. Now we've reached the end.
The title of this compilation, Mutant Pop, was apparently one of the descriptors that was applied to the artists on this label. And I think that 2.3 track is a good candidate for that, explaining why, they're catchy enough. But at the time, you have to remember, this is 78, 79. Punk is it's a brand new, and so it's still, now we hear melodic pop. We've been hearing it for 40 plus years at this point, but this still probably was pretty edgy stuff at the time. Yet it had, you could still sing along to it.
Yeah. That song kind of sounded like David Byrne singing for the Velvet Underground to me.
There's something unexpectedly American about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it could be from Hoboken or Lawrence, Kansas, or Cleveland, Ohio, or any of those other great cities that housed so many wonderful independent bands in the 1980s that were equally raw and tuneful. But it's also, it's sort of to me, it's sort of a timeless tune. I think if it's not my favorite song on this compilation, it's certainly on the metal platform.
Yeah, and they didn't release much, from what I could tell. 2.3, which their name was originally 2.3 Children, which was the average household at the time. Just like The Simpsons had, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie as the baby to represent the half kid of the average household. They shortened it to 2.3, and yeah, as far as I could tell, they only released this single, the two songs on the single in 78, but they did then, as recently as 2018, they put out a full album just out of nowhere after silence.
That is information that I learned maybe 45 seconds ago. But I have since bookmarked their Bandcamp, and it's described as the debut album that took 40 years to arrive.
Fascinating.
It was released in August of 2020. It has the single versions of All Time Low and Where To Now on it, plus 14 other songs. And at some point between when we record this and when this podcast is released, I will completely have listened to it. Because I'm almost like a little wary to press play because I love their single so much, but I got to know what this is like.
Yeah, it's the Chinese democracy of fast product. Yeah.
Well put.
That is wild. I just learned that shortly before we started recording. So more 2.3 is recently in the world.
All right, I've got a question for you guys. Is this the first usage of the term mutant pop? Because I know that term lived on past this comp. I think there was even a label in the 90s called that. But did they originate it? Was it a thing that was already in the air when this comp came out?
Is from what I could tell, and I don't, you're asking the question, but I don't want to definitively say that this is the case. I think that this is the origin of Mutant Pop, was the Fast Product label. I don't know of it being used prior to that. Do you have any idea, John?
I don't. Certainly, I if I were to see a record described using those two words next to each other, I would certainly make a point of listening to it.
Yeah. For some reason in my mind, when I first saw it, I thought of Os Mutantes, the Tropicalia band, but that's just because they were the mutants. Yeah, it's Portuguese for the mutants.
Yeah, I see what you did there. I mean, it's a very intriguing genre tag, especially for the time, late 70s. You know, how are you going to see mutant pop in the late 70s and not at least be curious as to what that sounds like?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's more intriguing than post-punk, and I don't know that post-punk was actually being used as a term at that point. I don't know if that's a retroactively applied term for, punk-inspired stuff that was a little more arty from this period.
Oh, that's a good question, because this is like when punk's happening.
Yeah,
It seems odd for there to be post-punk already.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I wonder who the first person was to use post-punk as a descriptor, because some of the bands on here definitely fit under that umbrella. Some are a little more art punk, like you said. But at the same time, like I always come back to how dismissive a term both emo and indie were to describe bands initially, that then just became the way that people explained, in real broad strokes what a group sounded like. But I don't think the same thing happened with post-punk. So maybe it was more bandied about at the time as a positive than either of those were.
It just sounds like a genre thing that like a critic came up with to me.
It does, but it also has this like, and maybe it's just from having listened to so many of these records and records like it, there's like kind of a brutalist, gray, concrete impersonability, if that's a word, to the words post and punk next to each other that I actually quite like. But like anything, I mean, if you look at it long enough, it doesn't mean anything.
I thought about the fact that, with the DIY aspect of Fast Product in the documentary that I don't think we've mentioned yet, the documentary that came out in 2015, Big Gold Dream, that highlights Fast Product and a few other early DIY labels of the UK punk scene. Nowadays I think we associate DIY and punk culture, they're side by side in a lot of ways. But, in 1977, when the year punk broke, all that stuff was coming out on majors. It was all on major labels. That was, what we think of as like the Sex Pistols and the Clash, the Ramones. That was all coming out on the majors. And these bands that 78, 79, they take that punk aesthetic, but they're the do-it-yourself approach. And, this, I don't know if we can overstate just how important Fast Product was to the concept of having your office be the bedroom of your flat, which is exactly what Bob Last and Hilary Morrison were doing in Edinburgh, Scotland. They're just, the stuff's getting recorded on the cheap. The office is right there in their flat. And it's, they're doing, Hillary's kind of handling more of the photography and the visual end of things. I think she was designing was under the impression she was designing the covers for this stuff. And meanwhile, Bob was handling more of the production and business end of things. And they were very influential on another now much better known label that started out DIY, Tony Wilson's Factory Records, which is very well known because of the fact that Joy Division were on that label, and then the Happy Mondays, and that's all on display in the very popular movie 24-Hour Party People. You know, there is no 24-Hour Party People for the Fast Product label. This documentary, Big Gold Dream, that came out just a few years ago, it was in production for nearly a decade. That's the closest you get. They did actually, I should mention, Bob Last and Hillary Morrison had considered signing Joy Division. They had known them when they were originally Warsaw. Then they changed their name to Joy Division. And Hillary was aware of the fact that Joy Division was the prostitution wings of the Nazi concentration camps. That's what Joy Division means. And that turned her off to the idea of signing this band with a name like that. So then they, of course, ended up on Tony Wilson's Factory Records instead, and the rest is history there.
I saw Bob Last referred to Factory Records as Fast 13.
Yes, he said that Factory Records were the 13th released by Fast Product, and he says he never told them that they had a release on his label. That's how he sees Factory Records, as basically the next step of Fast Product. Exactly.
Joy Division had 2 songs on Earcom 2, another Fast Product compilation. So they were working with them, but yeah, apparently declined to go any further than that.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. Well, Hillary Morrison, one of the co-founders that we've been talking about, she had a band called The Flowers, a Scottish band that formed in 1978. And we were going to feature their song Life After Dark next. So how about we do that?
I'm in.
All right.
When I first checked out this compilation, I was both pleasantly surprised that there was female lead vocals on at least one of the bands here, and also that song was like real funky and had a cool line between having like very rhythmic vocal delivery and bass lines, but also still got that raw kind of sloppy punk aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
That was great.
Gritty and dancey.
Yeah, Hillary was known for her feminist lyrics, and that was definitely happening in that song. It's worth noting that particular release, The Flowers, actually came out on the follow-up label to Fast Product that both Bob Last and Hillary Morrison started immediately. I don't know exactly why Fast Product folded, but then they just started this other label, Pop Oral, and released a similar amount of things over the similar amount of time for the next couple years. They went from Fast Product to Pop Oral. Basically, both labels encompass about 4 years of time and a couple dozen releases. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about putting out records under a label with one name and then putting out records under a label with a different name, but I guess it happens. Yeah, I mean that's another. It definitely on the back of my copy implies that this was going to be on a compilation EP that I think became the single that you were just talking about. And by my count, I think that's one of the 3 singles from this record that I've since picked up along the way since purchasing Mutant Pop however many decades ago. But again, it's just another, I keep saying the same things, just another wonderful, timeless, tuneful song. There is a contemporary band called Flowers who mine sort of similar territory to the band we just heard, and I say for shame.
Come up with your own name.
Use a search engine. Come on, band. Alta Vista that.
Now, Jeremy, you said while we were listening to that track that you did a little looking into the post-punk origins that we were discussing.
I got to the bottom of this. In this era, people probably would have called this new music with a K at the end of music for some reason. That was like the term for this kind of thing in that era. And then a couple different music critics claim to have been the first one to use the term post-punk, both in 1978, but it looks like it didn't catch on for a while. Also around that time, some journalists were calling stuff like this art punk, but it was meant as a pejorative when you called something art punk because it meant it was too like heady and fancy and was kind of like straying from what punk really was.
So very quickly, these lines were being drawn.
Yeah, it's not that different from how jocks used to call people Devo. Like that's the worst thing a jock could call you, was just be like, come on, Devo, what's wrong, Devo? To anyone who was interested in music like this.
It was like the follow-up to Greaser.
Actually, there probably are worse things a jock could have called you or me, and they likely did.
Just give them a little bit of time. They'll think of something.
Well, apparently Hillary Morrison, after The Flowers, she went on to sing in several other bands in the Edinburgh post-punk scene, including one of the better-known ones is the Fire Engines.
Yeah, great band.
I wasn't really familiar with them prior to doing some research for this, but yeah, they seem to have made quite the mark.
I think they were kind of ahead of the curve, and if memory serves, some of their songs are so almost like chainsaw guitar. Like it's really not off-putting. I'm terrible with describing things because it's very good, but it's just it's like the most extremes of, you know, the rawness and the tunefulness. But again, if they were a band that was doing the same thing 2 years later, 5 years later, 25 years later, they would be much more lauded. I believe all of their material got reissued by Domino a handful of years back.
Okay.
Yeah, back in 2006.
Very cool. Yeah, I was realizing, with just watching the documentary, reading about these bands, there's so many of them that I'm not familiar with. Another band that I've heard of for a long time is Joseph K. Uh, Can't say I'd ever really listened to them much. I go and listen to them, and they sound like a Flying Nun, New Zealand like type of band from a few years later. At least some of the stuff I checked out.
Yeah, it's actually cool just doing a quick look at the Domino website to find the Fire Engines collection, which is called Codex Teenage Premonition. And of course, it's presently out of stock. And actually, that's not all of their material. This is all live recordings and studio outtakes. So I don't know if their actual material is held up for some reason. But at the bottom of the Domino site, there's a related artists thing that has little arrows sort of, where you can jump between, and it sort of starts with the Go-Betweens, and then it goes to Joseph K, and then it goes to another Scottish group called Orange Juice, and then it goes to Aztec Camera.
Yeah.
So there are, and again, like I'm much more familiar with the Go-Betweens and Orange Juice than I am Joseph K and Aztec Camera, but they all seem to exist in a slightly similar orbit. So anything that gets people connecting their own dots and making these introductions is fine by me.
Yeah, I was surprised in watching the Big Gold Dream documentary. Yeah, it started getting into suddenly like Orange Juice was in there. I'm like, oh, the Rip It Up guys.
I feel like a drug dealer right now. Like we're showing people this affordable comp, but it's going to lead them to buying like $400 punk obscure 45s. And
Well, that, Jeremy, thank you. That leads to my next question for John. John, do you have some suggestions for either similar comps or similar music like this that can still be found out there without dropping tons of cash?
Yeah, I'll do one that's a little more close to home than the other. For me, I hear a lot of stuff like this that I was unfamiliar with previously by listening to the radio station where I work, WPRB. There are a couple of DJs there. I'm thinking there's a person named Dana Kay, another person named Kami Francis, who seem to constantly are unearthing these recordings from this same time period that I was unfamiliar with, that then I soak up with reckless abandon. But if you don't have your radio tuned to 103.3 FM or WPRB.com, a good place to start, because you can get a lot of bang for your buck, are these compilations called Mesthetics. There's Mesthetics Greatest Hits, Mesthetics 101 through 108, and they all focus on different regions of the United Kingdom in the late 70s to early 80s. So there's, Mesthetics number 107, DIY 78 to 81, London 3, or Mesthetics 108, South Coast DIY 77 to 81. Because in addition to the major label bands you were talking about, and in addition to compilations like this, or collections that might have music from Rough Trade, like Wanna Buy a Bridge is another great compilation that probably has bands that are slightly better known than what's on here, that are all in kind of the same shared universe. But these collections go pretty deep, and last I checked, they weren't super expensive. Let's see. Yeah, you could pick up Mesthetics Greatest Hits for $9 right now, and that one's got 22 songs on it from bands with names like Scrotum Poles and Dum 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 and Puritan Guitars and Danny and the Dressmakers. But I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by what you find therein. So I know those were real incredible surprises for me when these collections are put out by a guy named Chuck Warner, who also did compilations of a similar sort for American bands as part of the Homework and Hype to Death and Teen Line series. And any of those, like, there are still so many bands from the late 70s and early 80s that I think we're only just hearing about or only just being digitized. So that might be a place to start. But now I want to see how much a copy of Wanna Buy a Bridge goes for in this day and age. Because that, I mean, that has Mind Your Own Business by Delta 5 on it.
Okay.
Part-Time Punks by Television Personalities. It has a great Swell Map song. It has We Are All Prostitutes by the pop group.
Wow.
Young Marble
I
Giants.
know all these names.
Scritti Politti. Yeah, like I think like if you could go from between Fast Product and Wanna Buy a Bridge, like there are so many different directions in musical choose your own adventure you can go in and be richly rewarded.
I had a thought for a slightly more mainstream suggestion as well, and this is similar to Fast Product. Just a couple years ago was a $5 record you could find everywhere, and seems to be now more like 15, 20, but the A&M release from 81 from the concert A Music War, which has, it starts with The Police and Wall of Voodoo, and there's some big names on it, but then there's also some slightly more below the radar. There's, Gang of Four is on there. You got Klaus Nomi, 999, Magazine, X, The Cramps. It's an interesting mix of music and a cool concert film too.
Yeah, a movie that I'm embarrassed to say I've never seen, but the aforementioned Dana Kay from WPRB, she introduced a screening of that a couple months ago in Philadelphia that if COVID levels hadn't been crazy high, I would have gone to, because that's something that I really should see. And yeah, that double LP collection is another outstanding jumping off point.
I saw somewhere, I believe the Cramps were another band that Fast Product passed on.
Good.
Whoops.
Wow. I didn't know this was Jeremy's take on the Cramps.
I'm not a big fan of the Cramps. I'm not a big fan of like actual punk for the most part.
Well, that's more like rockabilly.
Well, yeah, and that's even worse for me.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess that goes more in that direction.
Yeah.
I like those collections, though. What is it called? The Bands the Cramps Taught Us, that are songs from the 50s and 60s that the Cramps would go on to cover.
Uh-huh.
I thought those were great ideas for collections.
It's always a trip to me that Alex Chilton produced the Cramps.
There are a couple bands that when I was, 13 or 14 and buying cassettes, I definitely bought Cramps cassettes thinking they would be quote unquote punker than they were. And that was a real surprise, was to get the sounds that they actually made. And I think to some extent, the Ramones were like that too, where, I thought it was going to be all loud, fast rules. And here they are singing songs about day trips to the beach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot more bubblegum than you probably expected.
Totally. Yeah. Which is, I love it all the more now, but just, it was, I was going down a very narrow path. So it was great to have these accidental introductions to things. Cause I think my discovery of punk rock probably came too young. So I had to like reverse engineer a lot of classic rock and things like that I never had that period when I should have. But there's no time like the present.
We all choose our own adventure one way or another. Well, John, all this talk about, running DIY labels, would you like to speak a little bit about what you do in that department?
Yeah, for sure. I've run a label called Comedy -1 for the past 15 years or so. We put out 2 or 3 records a year that we really care about. The most recent releases are the new album by a duo from Indiana called the Rutabaga and a trio from Portland, Oregon called Hurry Up, which is two of the three folks that used to be in a band called the Thermals, along with a member of a band called Bangs. And then we're gearing up to reissue the two Silkworm records that originally came out on Matador, Firewater, and Developer. And hopefully those will be a little bit more underway in 2023, because it's been a long time coming. But yeah, I mean, it's something I very, it's not that different from the radio in a certain way, running an independent record label, in the sense that all I want to do is share music that I really care about with other people. And doing it on the radio is much more immediate, and it can be anybody's music, and it happens, over a 3-hour chunk weekly, or 8 times that chunk on Christmas. But then putting out records is also personal, but it's a lot slower, and it's a lot more of a specific investment. But I think they're similar in a lot of ways, and the end goal is the same. The journey, or what have you, is just some of it is more ephemeral, and some of it is, the end result is this. Some of it is the fast product, and some of it is the physical product.
Yeah, I checked out that new release from the Rutabaga, who I love, and it's fantastic. That just came out recently. So yeah, and the Hurry Up, the little bit of that I checked out was excellent too. So, and you've also released stuff from former guest of the show, Ike Turner's band Out.
Yeah, the Out records, and the Minutes records, and those are, again, it's when you're dealing with a limited budget, and it's really about finding people who are on the same page as you, with the same sorts of expectations as you, that are in it for the ostensibly the same reasons as you are. And Ike and the Out folks are very much in that category, and I'm delighted that both of those records have the Comedy -1 logo on the back of them. Check them out.
Wonderful, John. Well, yeah, thank you for bringing this fast product our way, and for coming on the podcast.
You made it through the first hour. Now 24 more.
I did. I got to limber up.
We were going to exit with perhaps the best known track, one of the best known, if not the best known tracks on this, Damaged Goods by Gang of Four. This is what got them signed to EMI, and they re-recorded it for their now classic, well-known Entertainment! ! But this is the first version of it that we're going to hear.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a little bit slower, but it's, come on, it's Damaged Goods by Gang of Four.
What more can you say?
Nothing, which is why I didn't.
Well, I think we'll get out of here on that note. So thank you, listeners, for tuning into another installment of I'd Buy That for $1. My name is Peter Cook.
I'm co-host Jeremy.
I'm Sean Hartman.
I'm Jon Solomon. Wait, I said that too fast.
You can say it.
I'm Jon Solomon.